There's a debut in the WCW at this time, and it's the Renegade. Apparently, Richard Wilson, who
Ooh.
portrayed the Renegade, he was an exotic dancer turned wrestler, and Hogan wanted to renew the Ultimate Warrior stuff in WCW, but of course, bringing in Warrior was going to be cost prohibitive. Jim, what did you make of the Renegade in WCW?
He was kind of out there right off the bat.
Yeah.
He was a small guy. He was a short guy. And, he had the Napoleon complex. And just because they put the Warrior gimmick on him, he thought he was the Warrior.
Yeah.
Doesn't work quite that way, And he did have a little bit of an attitude. I understand he killed himself, I believe.
He did. I think it was after his contract expired with WCW. I don't know if he fell in hard times or what, but yeah, it was shortly thereafter.
Well, yeah. Well, the story I heard just now, telephone, telegraph, telewrestler.
Mm-hmm.
He was leaving. He had a fight with a girl, and he pulled the gun out and just was walking out and shot himself quickly without,
Horrible.
spur of the moment type thing.
Horrible. Like, you feel for the guy, obviously. But yeah, pretty unanimously, anybody who worked around him said like he couldn't work. He's essentially just brought in based on his look. He kind of sort of had a passing resemblance to the Ultimate Warrior, and so that was
He didn't have the body, he didn't have the height, he didn't have the intensity.
Yeah,
Warrior was a jerk. I know that very few guys actually like the Warrior, but you got to give the guy credit. He's on the Mount Rushmore. Warrior was Warrior. He had the look. His interviews, even though nobody knew what the hell he was talking about, they were so intense. His entrance was so intense. You got to put Warrior over, where it's more than just dressing him up and putting some nylon ties on him. A guy.
He had charisma, and DiBiase, every time I bring him up on my podcast with Ted just buries him, just goes off on him. And I'll kind of play devil's advocate and be like, well, when I was a kid, I liked him. He had face paint. He's big and jacked up. He's super excited. It got me excited. But then, as you become an adult, it's like, okay, all right. He's a Corvette with a, Pinto engine under the hood.
Yeah, well, his entrance was the best part of the his match,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I was just in Oklahoma City doing a Comic-Con. I don't know how many people came up and they said, "Hacksaw, we love watching you stomp on down to that ring with that flag and the 2x4." That is a big part of it. That's why they emphasize the entrances so much. Michael Hayes, of course, revolutionized that by just putting music to entrances and bringing guys down to music. And now it's evolved to, they spend more. I used to joke they spent more on glaciers, fireworks, and lasers and smoke and every damn thing else than they paid me in a year at one show. Like 10 minutes of fireworks and shit.
Yep.
And then he comes out and is like, "Yay."
Pretty much.
Nice guy, good guy, but I back in the day, now everything evolved. But I used to say, I don't want the fireworks, man. I used to like that pop,
yeah.
But it did the music just doesn't enhance it though.
Well, apparently during this time, WCW is going to ask Steve Austin to do a job for the Renegade, and he'll flat out refuse. And Meltzer had this to report about it. Austin became something of a hero, at least to some, if not many, in the dressing room, particularly those around for any length of time. Many are tired of newcomers, and some of whom don't have any talent, that are either ex-WWF characters past their prime or copies of such, beating and burying those who had been around for years but had been shoved aside just as they were entering their wrestling prime. So, Jim, all of that kind of statement and this mentality that I guess Steve and some other guys had during the time, it makes me wonder. Renegade was green as goose shit, and I think a lot of guys resented that he made his way up so quickly just due to this Warrior shit. Do you feel that Steve and others were justified for how they believed?
Well, if you go back to what you were saying about what Meltzer was talking about, the new guys coming in without proving themselves, he also mentioned WWF guys past their prime, which of course takes me and Hogan and Beefcake and all those guys. And yeah, Austin didn't want to put me over neither.
Right.
That's why that famous match where I beat him for the U.S. title is only 30 seconds long, because he went down with a phony injury. He didn't want to give me a match and put me over in a match. He went, "No, I'm hurt." So yeah, he had a reputation of not putting guys over.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the different. That's where you start to see the switch. We're doing a job for the guy and doing a favor for the guy. Where you would just expect it back in the day. But now you're going from one major to the Monday Night Wars. So I guess the business just evolved, and it probably made sense for him, but it didn't do anything for me. Of course, gave me the line, "I beat Austin so bad he had to shave his head and change his name. I beat the hair right off the boy's head. I should get a kickback on this Stone Cold thing."
He ended
That's
up
the only thing I got out of it because he didn't really do a good job for me, but I got the belt and everything.
he
But
ended up putting you over a lot on the house shows eventually, and I think
well,
that
he
it
didn't
was
really have a choice. It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
that Stone Cold is a gimmick, brother.
Hmm.
And I'll go back and look at the people he beat up. We don't want to talk about that.
Well, I do have to. I'm curious. So, obviously, you're a guy. You view it as a business, right? And when your boss says put a guy over, you put him over. It's your job. But I'm curious. Was there a time in your career when you were a young guy coming up and you resented some of the veteran guys in the locker room?
No, not really. No, nope. I always, even Bagwell back then talking about the old timers. It's time for those guys to make room for the young talent to come in and take over and show what they can. Pull it from my hands, brother. If you
Hmm.
want it, come get it. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. I'm holding on to it. This is the way I pay for my family. This is the way I take care of my life. If you want my job, you come get it. I'm not giving it up.
Yep.
And they're like, well, maybe it's time for those guys to move on. Well, maybe if you went out and got a pop out there instead of a polite clap, they keep you around. There's always room for talent, Marcus. I tell you what, people come up, I'm really worried, Hex, I don't, well, if you got over with the people, then they'll keep you. When time's up, they'll flush you down the toilet.
Yep.
Welcome to the big leagues, brother.
That's what this business is. And yeah, to your point, if you don't like the veteran guys, if you're fed up, go out there and get over. Make the most of your spot. Yeah. You're living proof.
Take
They
their
turn you
job. What do you want them to say? Well, thanks very much. I'm leaving and going home.
right.
Are you kidding? That's why they brought me back. That's a great example. I'm WWF. I'm Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Boom, boom. I won the first ever Royal Rumble. I'm doing my deal. I knocked Andre the Giant out with my 2x4. I come back in WWE. They got me with Super Crazy teamed up with Eugene. But I'm still making a paycheck. I'm still paying for my family. That's why
Yep.
people say, well, WW or WCW, they were doing you a favor. Vince Russo said, well, I was doing you a favor giving you a job at WCW. Well, funny, when the WCW folds, Russo goes home. His top guy goes home. The other top guy goes home. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I go up to WWE and have another 4 or 5 year run. Oh,
Just goes, the proof is in the pudding, right?
sometimes I get excited, Marcus. I'm sorry, brother.
I'm with you, though. I
Get a
get
little fired
about
up
it,
every
too.
once in a while. 71 years old, and every once in a while, Hacksaw, he still gets me in trouble. Here we go, baby. Oh! That's one thing about living out in the country, man. Back when I lived with neighbors, people are like, what the hell?
I'm sure I just woke up both my daughters, but it's fine. They'll recover. Piper knows what I'm up to down here. But no,
Yeah, Piper would be hoeing back at you.
she probably just said it up there. But no, to your point, and a lot of guys that are in that position, they'll bitch about creative and say, well, you tell me to go get over, but they give me shit creative. How am I supposed to go out there and get over? It's like, well, they did make Jim Duggan a janitor, and he still got over with the audience. He breathed new life into Saturday Night with that gimmick. It's like, there's always a way. There's always a way.
Yeah,
If
you can get over. Yeah, of course, go in and you just don't eat a ham sandwich. Put your input in and just don't accept everything. But yeah, you're going to go along with the boss.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's it. They're in charge. It's like being on the soap opera, and you're the bad guy in the soap opera. You're not going to say, "Well, I want to be the good guy this week," or I don't want that guy to beat me up. I want to beat him up.
Right.
It's like when I first started wrestling, when I'm a young kid, I didn't know that thing. And they're like, Doug, this guy's going to beat you in about 8 minutes. And I'm like, well, I can beat him. I know I can beat him. And of course, the guy I'm working with is going, oh, Jesus, young guy. But anyhow,
A young guy that
I
I was in the
report.
locker room with not too long ago, he wasn't happy with what they were doing with him that night. And he was like, "What do you think I ought to do?" And I was like, "I think you ought to just do what they tell you to do." I was like, "Imagine if you're in a stage play on Broadway and your character's supposed to die, and you go to the director and you say, I really don't want my character to die. Like, it's stupid.
And so,
It's a
yeah.
job."
And what are they thinking next week? They're like, well, this guy asked this guy to do that. And he didn't want to do that. So I know he ain't going to do this. So it hurts business. And a lot of people put that on, like Owen, God bless him. People say, well, that was like, well, Owen, if you don't do it, somebody else will repel from the ceiling. And
Hmm.
Owen's, the story, I already didn't want to do it. And he's like, well, okay, yeah, I'll do it. So yeah, if you got to pick and choose, but especially on an indie level, yeah, because you want to be involved next week. If the guy beats you, for the title, you come back next week. I mean, whatever they want you to do.
That's it. Yeah, just especially at this, as you said, at this level, keep your mouth shut. Just do the job, and you'll start to establish goodwill with people. And if you're good
and
enough, you'll get a push.
and do a good job for the guy. Don't go out there and do a half-ass
Yeah.
job. You go out, put the guy over strong. That's why I always appreciate Edge doing that great job for me at WWE. And I put him over at the end, but he gave me a great match.
Yes. Yeah, a true professional, and he understands the business. If he just comes out and mops the floor with Hacksaw, then you just beat, you didn't
Beat an
beat
old
anybody.
man, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That way you beat somebody. Put me over a little bit. Yeah, the old bastard's got one left in him.
Hmm.
So when he finally beat me, he beat somebody.